Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It is my great pleasure and honor to open the first webinar of Edukacja Filozoficzna, International Journal of Philosophical Education. I am editor-in-chief of this journal. My name is Marcin Trepczyński. The chair of today's meeting and the first webinar will be Professor Anna Brożek from the Faculty of Philosophy, University of Warsaw, head of the Lvov-Warsaw School Research Center, and also one of issue editors of the volume we will very soon publish in Edukacja Filozoficzna dedicated to philosophical education in Lvov-Warsaw School. So Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the idea of these webinars. I think it's a fantastic idea to, I don't know, make some advertisement of our work, of what we are planning to do, what we are planning to publish. Also, thank you very much to the editorial team of Edukacja Filozoficzna for making it possible to publish a special issue about philosophical education in the Lvov-Warsaw School. The topic is so huge and we got so many submissions of papers that in fact there will be no one volume, but two volumes about the Lvov-Warsaw School, about philosophical and logical education in this intellectual formation. And let me just say a few words, make a short introduction about the idea of the volume, about the importance of philosophical education in the Lvov-Warsaw School. And then I will present two young scholars who prepared their articles, their papers for the volume, which will be published quite soon, as Marcin just said. And they will present some details of their investigations which are presented at Edukacja Filozoficzna. So why the Lvov-Warsaw School and why Edukacja Filozoficzna, why philosophical education in this school? Well, for those who don't know too much about this philosophical group, the Lvov-Warsaw School is a branch of analytic movement, which is exceptional, particular for several reasons. Firstly, it is a Central European or Eastern European intellectual group, not Western group, not British, not American, but it started here in Lvov, which is now a part of Ukraine. Then 100 years ago, it was a part of Poland. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was a part of Austria-Hungary Empire, so very interesting from the cultural point of view. It was very interesting place, but the school that was founded in Lvov was a school of somehow Polish philosophers, because the main language, the almost exclusive language that was used in the school debates and publications was Polish. And this use of the Polish language, of Slavic language, it is another exceptional feature, special feature, peculiarity of the Lvov-Warsaw School, not the German, not English, but Slavic language, Polish language, in fact. Then one of peculiarities of the school is that it had very moderate position in the discussion between formal and descriptive orientation in analytic movement. I mean, it was never so logically oriented as the Vienna Circle. It was not never so scientistic philosophy. It was also not so much descriptive as British philosophy, British movement, but it was in the middle. And one of the most important element of philosophy in the Lvov-Warsaw School was a kind of optimism, philosophical optimism. I mean, Twardowski and his students believed that philosophy is composed of the problems which are important and which, for to some degree at least, may be resolved. Okay, they may be somehow elaborated, analyzed, and through the use of logical methods, very broadly understood, not only formal but also informal methods, they may be resolved. And the last and perhaps the most important feature of the Lvov-Warsaw School, which distinguishes this formation from other analytic centers, sorry, is that it was really a school. Namely, the most important interpersonal relation within the school was the relation of teacher-student, or even mentor-student, or even, as philosophers from the Lvov-Warsaw School used to say, master and students. I know that this term master is not so often used in the English literature because it has some bad connotations, but in Poland, Polish philosophers usually called Twardowski, their teacher, mistrz, I mean master, yes, master. And the philosophy teacher in the school was really a strong authority, someone who we believed in, and someone who we would like to follow in the steps of making philosophy. And that's why the philosophical education was so important in the school. In the school, not only some programs for philosophical training were produced, were formulated, but also the teaching philosophy was practiced in so sophisticated ways on many levels that my opinion is that this model of philosophical education, which was proposed by Twardowski, is something universal, which may be repeated also in our times in the 21st century. And this model of philosophical training is sometimes compared to the ancient schools of philosophy, to the way Socrates, Plato, Aristotle taught their students in an atmosphere of common searching for the truth, in the atmosphere of discussion. I don't know if you agree, Aleksandra and Ewelina, but I think that teaching philosophy in the Lvov-Warsaw School is just making philosophy together, searching for the truth, searching for the best solutions. And the program of philosophical education in the Lvov-Warsaw School is very diversified, and Twardowski and his students proposed some solutions for philosophical education on many levels. We will know from Ewelina's paper that he had a great program for philosophical propedeutics, which should be taught in secondary schools. Twardowski also had a program for philosophy teaching in universities, but not only for philosophers, but also for some more general audience. I mean, his lectures in general philosophy courses were dedicated to large audience, and he presented many sophisticated philosophical problems in a clear manner, in such a way that everybody started to understand what it is about and why philosophy is important in their lives. And for special students, for students who were talented and interested in philosophy, he proposed a specialist program, the program which he implemented in his seminars. And it took several years to become an educated philosopher in Twardowski School. He started from simple tasks which his students had to resolve. And then the students got more and more sophisticated problems to solve. And finally, everything was ended with a doctorate, which was in which Twardowski students had to prove that they are really independently thinking philosophers. Okay, so Twardowski wanted to teach not how to write a history of philosophy, or just how to, I don't know, use the philosophical language or something like that, but to really do something new in philosophy, really solve some problems. That was the aim of his education. Of course, it was not easy, but in every doctoral dissertation, in every dissertation written under Twardowski's supervision, we see the deep analysis and something which is really resolved, which is made clearer, which is justified in a better way, and so on. That's why the problem of philosophical education in the Lvov-Warsaw School is so important and so interesting, and that's why we got so many various submissions to this special volume about philosophical education in the Lvov-Warsaw School. And now I would like to present, perhaps we will start with Ewelina and then Aleksandra. What do you think? We can follow like this. Okay, I would like to introduce Ewelina Grądzka, who is also a co-editor of this special issue, also together with Krzysztof Nowicki, another young scholar who is involved in this volume. And Ewelina will present the content of her paper, which she prepared with Professor Paweł Polak, her supervisor from Krakow. And Ewelina, please, I don't know the exact title of your paper, but it concerns this philosophical propedeutics and the way Twardowski approached this problem.
Hello, thank you. I would just like to ask if I can get access to present, because I cannot open my PowerPoint presentation.
We will make you a call. I don't know if it is possible. Philip, can you make
I think you just have to agree that everybody can show, and that's okay. I don't think others will.
I don't have the rights of a moderator of the video meeting. But I believe that you have, together with Marcin. So
Marcin, I'm co-host, unfortunately not the host, but I will look for this solution. Perhaps it is possible.
Or Ewelina, if you have a presentation, then you can just as a way of omitting the problem, send it to us so that Anya may put it on screen.
Can you share the screen? Can you share
I don't. Just Anya can.
I can. Sorry, unfortunately, I'm not the main host, only co-host. So I think I'm not able to add this role to you, and I'm afraid that Marcin is not available for a moment.
Okay, just give me a second. I'm sending it to you.
You may also send it through the chat, so that all of us can look at it. Whatever you like.
Is uwu.edu.pl okay? Okay, so it just went. Okay. So in the meantime, I want to thank you also, the organizers, for this wonderful opportunity to share research, which took some time. And as Professor Brożek has introduced, it is a great pleasure and a great honor to work on this subject. And the more I work on the subject, the more I'm fascinated with the whole idea that was among members of the Lvov-Warsaw School, but also of the level of discussion that took place about philosophy education in Poland at that time. And I very much regret there's no discussion like that nowadays, which is extremely important. And maybe that's my manifesto that I would like to encourage. And maybe that's an idea for a future special issue for Edukacja Filozoficzna, to invite Polish philosophers to discuss what is the role, aim, and how philosophical education should look like, because there are a lot of controversies about what's going on now. And surely the papers that were published in the 1920s are very inspiring. And I regret we don't follow this tradition. So maybe that's also a recommendation for future publication. Okay, so yes, this is the title of our presentation, of our paper. The paper is pretty large, I admit, but we wanted to fit in a lot of information which I regret not having when I started, because a lot of information is spread around. So we wanted to introduce the historical, pedagogical, and philosophical background of Kazimierz Twardowski's project for teaching the philosophical propedeutic. Okay, yes, if you can change the slide. So very shortly, this is a plan of the paper, the most recent plan of the paper. So we start with philosophy indication before World War I. We wanted to show a more general picture of what happened in philosophy education in Poland, even from medieval ages, which I think is also interesting, and especially in English, to introduce English speakers, that this is not a new idea to teach philosophy, but it has longer tradition. And then we focus on the interwar context, because this refers directly to the period when the programs were published and prepared. First we focus on challenges of regained independence, because this is very important to understand how the program looks like and why there were different programs and why there were changes in a very pretty short period of time. And we speak about education policy that influenced the programs and that made Twardowski react or adjust to this political situation. Another aspect is we tried to reconstruct the whole discussion that took place between 19 and 39, showing how this process looked like, at least according to the information we managed to find in the archives or in the diaries, to present that this was a longer process. There were discussions, some people were involved, some changes among the people who were involved happened. And finally, we focus on what is the content of the programs and how Austrian tradition influenced what happened in Polish teaching of philosophy. Okay, so if you can change the slide, I will focus on the main, and the whole paper generally is an introduction to the translation of the program that is found in the archive where Twardowski's manuscripts are held. And this is the program from 1935, and this program is already published in Polish, but it was not translated yet. But I have to admit that during investigation, it turned out that the problem is more complex, and I hope that maybe we'll manage to translate to other programs. Maybe we'll fit it somehow to the journal, because I think it gives a broader context for this program. And I want to open the floor for discussing it. We will not discuss directly in the paper the program itself. Okay, so if you can change the slide, please. So we don't start this in the paper, but I just want to start here with few information that I think are the key points of this paper. So the fact that the propedeutic of philosophy is very strongly related in Poland to propedeutic of philosophy in Austria. In Austria, it appeared because of the reforms that were offered by Leoton Hohenstein and through the influence of Franz Exner and Hermann Bonitz, and it came from Prussia. I had the privilege to be at this university in Vienna, and I took myself a picture with this establishment. I feel a team of them. So we work in the same team, I think. And what is interesting, thanks to this visit, where I also presented information that is in this paper, and which was very well received by the Vienna Circle Society or Association, I don't remember. And also I discovered, thanks to their recommendations, some more information about Austrian heritage, although I have to admit, and this is maybe positive in the negative sense, that they also have not yet described the whole history of their propedeutic. So my research was inspiring for them, that we started this organization of information around this topic. So the interesting fact is that as Arendt's claims is that practical pedagogical project was deeply intertwined with the bureaucratic institutions of Imperial Royal Austria-Hungary, concerned as it was with improvement of what today we would call human capital, especially the bureaucrats, who were defined as national assets, a special class of knowledge workers who ran the state. So it seems that that was also the foundations of the propedeutic, and it will influence the vision of propedeutic in Poland later on. Okay, if you can please change the slide. So very important also for the way the programs were formed and what Twardowski thought is, of course, his personal experience, because he experienced Austrian propedeutic in school. It was, of course, in Theresianum. If you could switch for a second, because in the second slide I have Theresianum presented. So, Professor Brożek, could you switch a slide for a second? Okay. Yeah, to the next one, Yeah, so I just wanted to show the Gymnasium Theresianum. This is where he studied propedeutic of philosophy. Here we can see him. Also, this is his young version on the left with the arrow. I tried to show him. But this experience of propedeutic, if you can move back to the slide, please, it's okay, was of propedeutic taught from Robert Zimmerman textbook, which he really regretted, and he even mentions this in his self-portrait. So I think it is very important, because I don't know if I would mention in my autobiography something, from high school. So if I would mention, probably it would really influence my life. So I understand that this kind of really disappointment with Zimmerman's textbook is significant. And he, of course, was jealous that he couldn't be taught by Aleksandra Hoffler. And later, Hoffler was, of course, Brentano's student and part of the Brentanian school. And later on, Hoffler prepared a textbook with Alexius Meinong, and it became canonical. It was the next textbook, and it influenced the next generation. Some of the Vienna circle members learned from this textbook. And later on, Twardowski will recommend translation of this textbook into Polish, and Zawirski will be the person who translated the textbook, which also Twardowski prepared a review of, claiming that this is the best solution. For the moment, we didn't have a textbook, and we really long didn't have a textbook. Okay, if you can switch. Yes, and also I think an interesting and romantic paper that shows Twardowski's attitude to propedeutic of philosophy is his paper from 1919. I would call this paper apologetic, because I don't think it's classically a paper that takes part in the discussion that took place, because it doesn't give arguments on hours and more technical issues. It's really like a expose of Twardowski's idea why a propedeutic of philosophy is important. And interestingly, it is in this very crucial moment when the new independent Poland is reforming, is putting education system together, and there were discussions if propedeutic at all should be included. So I understand that Twardowski had like this verge to share why it is crucial. And I like this piece that tells that there must be a revolution in the mind of every child, like there was a revolution in mankind when that happened in Athens. And I think this is very inspiring, and maybe also a hint because there is a claim that everybody is a born philosopher, and I see that here Twardowski would claim that you have to kind of have this revolution in your mind. And this, by the way, this paper is also translated into English, and this is our second paper at the finish of preparation. Okay, so if you can switch the page, and of course this is also a very strong citation from Twardowski that believes and shows also his strong patriotism towards school and the importance of education, saying Poland is a great thing, and one of the greatest pieces of this great thing is Polish school, and he really wanted Polish school to provide wonderful educated citizens. Okay, thank you. And the next one. So also here I will not go over this whole piece, but I just wanted to show you that it was not that obvious that the way Twardowski thought about propedeutic was the only one. There were concurrent visions, and Ignacy Halpern presented them in his paper. He presented at least 7 variations. So it was not that obvious that logic and psychology, which were part of Twardowski's initial vision, would be accepted. Okay. So what we managed to find in archives is a program that was officially published by the ministry from, and this unfortunately is only from 1931, but it's a 5th edition. So I suppose that it is the program that was from the beginning of from the beginning. That is the earliest program. And something that is interesting is that after we compared this program with the program found in the archives of Twardowski, can you change the slide, please? So the programs from 21 and for psychology and 22 for logic is almost the same. What is also important is that in this program that is published, you don't have the author. So officially we don't know, but if you compare the programs, so almost 90 or 99% of these texts are identical. So it seems that it was Twardowski's program that was at least until this 1931, but as long as I understood from all the other documents we had, it was until 1937. So we can assume that Twardowski's idea was through the whole independent period of Poland, was at school. And I would call this program minimalistic because Twardowski claimed that this is the minimum and we shouldn't go farther because there is not enough hours to extend, and this is the minimum that children should be taught, children like adolescents at that period. But this program was highly criticized, and it should adjust to the new education movement tendencies and also Sanacja's vision after makeup in 1926. So there was pressure on improvements. And if you can switch to the next one. So here we get to this program from 1935, which is translated and presented in this paper, which I would call maximalist, because here we have a lot of much more issues, and it extends the only problems of logic and psychology. We have problems related to aesthetics, to ethics, but also to the problem of the state, social issues. So it is also divided more into sets of problems, which is also kind of showing that Twardowski was trying to adjust to this requirements of the more practical, more project-like style of education. But also, importantly, this program is prepared for 6 hours a week, which was, of course, that's why I say it's maximalist, because I don't know if anybody would ever imagine we have 6 hours of philosophy at school, but it is still unimaginable that until that moment there were 3 hours of philosophy at school. Yes, which is still out of the reach for today when we have 1 hour and we struggle maintain it, I think. So anyway, it turns out that this program was not published and was not in use, and it seems the works continued. Twardowski was requested, I just kind of put together this information a few days ago, that the request was later on from the ministry, and this was treated probably as a recommendation. There is also a memorial for this program. This memorial was published, and it is also translated. I hope we're going to add this to the edition of the special issue. So if you can move on, that's the last part. Finally, it turned out that because in this information from the ministry, the invitation is for Twardowski in 1936 to prepare the program, but also to invite Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz and Mieczysław Kreutz to participate in the preparation. And we don't find anything else in Twardowski's archive, but if you look into Ajdukiewicz collection, you can find a program from, well, I think the program is not itself, doesn't have a date, but we have a program that was published by the ministry from 1937, but the program is called temporary, so it seems that it was also not understood as the final version. But if you compare these programs, they are very similar. They're not the same, but they are very, very similar, showing that it looks like this is the program that Ajdukiewicz supposedly prepared. But as I say, since first of all they both were invited, it seems reasonable to think that it is at least work of both of them. But also there is a piece of letter, just really the first page, and it is cut, where Ajdukiewicz writes to Twardowski and says that, thank you for the program you sent me, and I really like that you changed a few parts according to what I have advised. So it looks like, but of course these two pieces of documents are not connected physically, but it seems that it might be the point to understand that at least Twardowski influenced. And I would call this program much more pragmatic, because it kind of responds to the expectations and is reduced in comparison to this 1935 and bigger than this one from 1921 and 22. Okay, I think that would be heading for an end. If you can show the last, I think there is a last slide. Okay, so just one last thing is, unfortunately, although this whole works took place and there were discussions, this whole program collapsed after the Second World War, when with slow process of disappearance of propedeutic of philosophy. Professor Jadacki described this in his paper, and as long as I understand, Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz and Tadeusz Katarbiński, students of Twardowski, collaborators, they fought for survival of propedeutic at school, and as long as I understand, they even sacrificed philosophical journals to kind of negotiate keeping the propedeutic at school. But anyway, in the end, propedeutic was removed from school. But it shows, I think, their example, and that the importance of propedeutic and understanding of the importance of propedeutic at school. Okay, and if you can show finally the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you very much, Ewelina. Perhaps there are some questions and comments to Ewelina's papers. I think that we can now let for 2 or 3 short questions.
I have a question.
Yes, please, Aleksandra.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Thank you. So I was thinking whether, this research of yours is only historical, or do you want to formulate, or you can formulate certain recommendations for what happens now, or what could we do for the philosophical education in Poland right now? not only in high schools, but I think that there are problems also at the universities. So can we apply some of those recommendations or ideas that were formulated by Twardowski and his students?
Yes, as I said in the beginning, the more I investigate, the more things appeared. That's why we decided that we're gonna divide it into papers, and there are already two large papers trying to present the whole context, and because I think that introducing people even to the discussion, or even to the fact that there were different programs and how they were influenced, is important for awareness of the whole problem, and also inspiring. So this is just turned out to be the first steps, and we wanted to share what we already have. And yes, I think the next steps should be kind of a recommendation. I also would like to do research in Austria, because it is very interesting, and this would refer to your question of present situation, because this subject is until today in Austrian curriculum. It changed the name because they removed logic, and there is psychology and philosophy, but generally this is kind of the same route. And they have 1 semester of psychology and 1 semester of philosophy. But this is one teacher that teaches this subject, and there is a special training at the university to prepare only this type of teachers. And they have right now at the university about 800 students learning to be this type of a teacher, because in Austria this subject is obligatory at school. So it also shows that this is also a response to the problem mentioned in Polski Zjazd Filozoficzny, why we don't have students at philosophy, etc. Maybe because we don't have philosophy in high school. And they told me that at philosophy, general philosophy, on the first grade, they have 8,000 philosophy students, something like that. And I think this is a consequence of having this subject at school. And interestingly, it's the last grade, because now in Polish education, it's the first grade. So yes, I think this could influence, and I hope it will be presented. And also, I know that we should prepare more thorough analysis of these programs, which is also put aside because, as I said already, we had so much material that would be a little bit impossible. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments?
May I?
Please,
Yes.
please. Yes,
Sure,
please,
sure,
Professor.
I have a question for Anna, who introduced this topic, because I'm not working in education in the sense that I do that theoretically. I'm just a philosopher. So when you introduced this topic, you made a distinction between formal and descriptive approach. The former you related to Vienna, and the latter to British philosophy, probably Cambridge, Russell, and Wittgenstein. And when we say British, then if there is Wittgenstein, it is again Vienna's. So my question is, what do you mean by this distinction between formal and descriptive approach? And you said how this Lviv, I don't know if I pronounce it well, probably not, Lvov, how do you say it, approach of Twardowski is something in between. And then why I'm puzzled about this? Because then you have this question about the dynamics between Krakow and Lviv, those two schools. And it seems as if Krakow was more descriptive, because Russell wrote a recommendation letter for Leon Tristek to get his position in Lviv against Alfred Teitelbaum, Alfred Tarski. So is there something, I'm puzzled about that because I cannot read those things in Polish. I read the things that were written in English or translated into English. So when you said formal and descriptive, I'm just wondering whether Tristek was more descriptive in some sense, closer, obviously closer to Russell, and or maybe there is something between realism and nominalism. So it is just something that inspired me. So, if you can say.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this question. Well, I don't want to take too much time because it's not the main subject of this meeting. I don't want to take time from Aleksandra, but let me just answer just shortly. This question of the tension between the formal approach or reconstructionist approach and descriptive approach is something I was elaborating for some time now, and even during the conference in Dubrovnik last spring, I presented a paper about it. What I mean by these two groups is that one is that everything should be reconstructed with the languages of formal mathematical logic. And that was, of course, approached by the Vienna Circle, but also for Russell in some time. And the second is descriptive. By descriptive, I mean, let's call it soft analysis, analytic philosophy of natural language. So on one hand, we've got the languages of formal logic. On the other hand, we've got philosophers of natural language. And what I mean that the Lvov-Warsaw School is in between. They, of course, used some logical tools, and they thought that knowing the logical tools is important in making philosophy, but then they don't believe that it is the remedy for all philosophical problems, and that we may reconstruct the world or solve problems by the use of formal tools, because it's not enough simply. We, in order to make philosophy, we have to use formal methods, but also some other analytical methods like analysis of concepts, the method of paraphrase of statements, everything. It is also important, and for philosophical investigations, maybe analysis and paraphrases are the most important, not only formal methods. And on the other hand, we had this descriptive natural language philosophy, and of course, the members of the school also distanced themselves from that, because in philosophy we don't use natural language. We use a specialist language, which is of course based on natural language, as every language of science, language of biology, language of physics, language of history. All of them are based on natural language, but the terms, the concepts are improved. They are defined. We try to find the best conceptual scheme to solve philosophical problems, to solve the problems of epistemology, of metaphysics, of, I don't know, ethics, and so on. So natural language is, of course, not enough, because it's ambiguous, it's unclear, it confuses us, it provokes many problems which cause that our discussions are useless because they are verbal discussions. On the other hand, we've got formal languages which are useful, but by formal methods we are just approaching very simple problems, too simple. So it's also not enough. So we have to find something in between, okay? So to make our concept more and more clear, to make our language more and more precise, to use formal methods if they are needed, but formal methods are not enough, okay? That was the idea of Twardowski and his students. Of course, there were several different ideas of how to approach to these problems. Twardowski was much more descriptive, let's say. Jan Łukasiewicz, who introduced mathematical logic into the school, was much more formal than Twardowski, but no of them were at these extremes, okay? So Łukasiewicz would never agree with the ideas of the Vienna Circle, with Wittgenstein, and Twardowski would never agree to philosophers of natural language, because he simply was sure that natural language causes only misunderstandings, and we have to precise what we are talking about in philosophy. So that's what I mean by balancing between these two extremes in analytic movement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for talking too long about it. Okay, and now, well, the Lvov-Warsaw School is sometimes seen by us as a kind of unity, and we sometimes see it as a group of people who agreed and had one conception of philosophy, but it is, of course, a simplification. There were several discussions and tensions between them, and one of important tension was between the analytic conception of philosophy and the phenomenology, which was represented in Lvov, in the environment of Twardowski School, by Roman Ingarden. Roman Ingarden, who started to study in Lvov by Kazimierz Twardowski, but felt that the way Twardowski is dealing with philosophy is not enough, and he went to Husserl and became a phenomenologist. And Aleksandra Gomułczak prepared a beautiful study about these connections between the school of Twardowski and phenomenology, and she presented it in an article submitted to our volume. And now, please, Aleksandra, the stage is yours. You may present us some main ideas of this paper.
Yes, thank you, Professor Brożek, for this beautiful introduction, and for the invitation to present this this research. So my paper is devoted to the problem of Ingarden's criticism of Twardowski's philosophical program, and the reception of phenomenology in the Lvov-Warsaw School. And the whole idea for the paper is part of the wider research which I conducted while writing my doctoral dissertation that is almost completed. Because I'm interested in the question about the position of the Lvov-Warsaw School in the context of the analytic continental divide. And what sparked my interest was that the school is actually absent from the research which is done on the analytic continental divides. Like last 20 years, we can observe like the growing interest in the problems of analytic continental divide and how those two traditions relate to each other, whether it is an opposition or it is not actually an opposition, and people study the history of the divide, how it was created, and what was the consequences of it, etc., etc. But scholars actually focused mostly on British philosophy, French, German, Vienna Circle, but the Lvov-Warsaw School is very rarely mentioned, and when it is mentioned as a representative of analytic tradition in Poland, or logical school in Poland, or something like that. But what interested me in the Lvov-Warsaw School in this context is we also say that in Poland that it is a part of an analytic tradition, but the school is a specific analytic school, I would say. It has many different, it differs from British and philosophy and Vienna circles, and Professor Brożek already said something about that. And another thing that is unique to the school is its relationship with Roman Ingarden, a phenomenologist, who was in the environment of the school for many years. So my paper, there were many tensions between Ingarden and the Lvov-Warsaw School. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so in my paper, I mainly because of the topic of the issue of Edukacja Filozoficzna, I focused on the problem of Twardowski's philosophical education, because it was one of the targets of Ingarden's criticism. And he criticized it also in this context, like of his idea that Lvov-Warsaw School, in his mind, wasn't interested in phenomenology or even ignored phenomenology. And he was very unhappy with the reception of phenomenology by the Lvov-Warsaw School. And I argue that he implicitly accused Twardowski's program or adherence to the Twardowski's program by his students for this reserved or ignorance of phenomenology in the Lvov-Warsaw School. And I try to show in the paper that it is actually not entirely accurate, this view that people from the Lvov-Warsaw School rejected phenomenology. There were actually there are significant connections between Twardowski's students and a phenomenological movement, especially Husserl. And many of Twardowski's students were interested in Husserl's philosophy and like applied some of the concepts he developed. They also discussed phenomenology. So there actually we can point to the quite wide interest in phenomenology in the Lvov-Warsaw School, and this is the field which is still actually not very well researched. So that's why I decided to work on this. So to start, like my paper is divided generally into three sections. The first one I try to present very briefly the main elements of Twardowski's philosophical program to show which points are criticized by Ingarden. In the second part, I present Ingarden's criticism and its consequences. And in the third part, I highlight like those main fields of interest in phenomenology in the Lvov-Warsaw School. So actually, I was hoping that Professor Brożek or Ewelina were saying a little bit more about details of Twardowski's program, but and I was imagining that I would just skip this part, but it wasn't the case. I'm sorry. So I will just start with very briefly. I will talk about like this detailed. Some details about Twardowski's philosophical program. So the program in Twardowski actually talks a lot about that this like his idea of teaching philosophy or of doing philosophy comes from Franz Brentano, and he was very eager to disseminate Brentanian style of philosophizing in Poland. And it is also an important connection to the phenomenological movement because Husserl was also Brentano's students. Twardowski's philosophical program consists of main three elements, like the concept of philosophy, the philosophical style, and the program of philosophical education. So I will skip the first part, like the concept of philosophy. I think it's not so important here. I don't want to take too much time. But generally, Twardowski considers philosophy as a set of philosophical sciences, and also an Brentanian idea. And he considers psychology to be the basis of other philosophical disciplines. However, he later changed this view a little bit. And he actually had this idea that philosophy does not differ from other sciences. It is neither in subject nor in method. So he actually wanted for philosophy to be considered as an important science. Okay. So, and a number of Twardowski students adopted this concept of scientific philosophy, we sometimes say in Poland. The main issue for Ingarden is actually philosophical style. So the style of philosophizing that was cultivated in Twardowski's school. So there were several postulates that were formulated by Twardowski. So the first one was clarity of speech. Second one was justification of statements. Third one was minimalistic scopes of inquiry. And fourth was the value system. Ingarden, in his criticism, targets mainly the postulate of the clarity of speech and the postulate of the minimalistic scope of inquiry. And in Twardowski, I think this is actually quite well researched right now, like his program in this sense. So I will just say a few words. So the postulate of clarity of speech is very essential to the Lvov-Warsaw School, and they are sometimes called even clarity makers. And Twardowski argued that even the most complex philosophical problems can be formulated and expressed clearly. And in his paper on clear and unclear philosophical style, he makes some like strong statements that if a philosophical writing is obscure, then it is a sign of an obscure thought, and if philosophical work is unclear, one should not strain to understand it. And this is what caused like Ingarden to criticize this postulate. And the second postulate criticized by Ingarden is this idea of minimalistic way of conducting philosophical investigations. Namely, Twardowski argued that instead of constructing like big philosophical systems by means of speculation, we should examine specific issues and systematically gather detailed knowledge, and it should be done by many people. So he considers philosophy not to be as like something created by some sort of a genius who like creates like this whole big system, but it should be done by like one person does one thing, another person does another thing, and we collect this the knowledge system together. So it was probably connected to his view that induction is an important like method for philosophical investigations. So Twardowski also, which is I think important for the philosophy for the members of the Lvov-Warsaw School attitudes toward phenomenology, he also cultivated several values, which was criticism and also autocriticism, anti-dogmatism and independence. And he never imposed on his students any particular doctrine. He didn't want them to be descriptive psychologists or logicians or metaphysicians, whatever. He just wanted them to philosophize clearly, to justify their statements and be accurate, etc. So his idea was mostly methodic, not doctrinal. Okay, and he also to like realize this whole idea of philosophy, like to teach his students to how to use that philosophical style, let's say. He created the program of philosophical education, which was quite broad and very demanding. And Ewelina already told us a little bit about that. So the philosophers from the Lvov-Warsaw School had to gain a lot of expertise in many fields. For example, Twardowski wanted them to be acquainted not only with history of philosophy and systematic philosophy, but also with logic, psychology, and some other scientific discipline like mathematics, physics, or history. He also wanted them to learn foreign languages, both classical languages, and his idea was that we should read in original. And we can see that many of Twardowski's students, and it was also the consequence of the education, like in high school education they got at the time. Right now we don't teach Greek and Latin at school, and back then it was standard. So they knew languages, and they also contributed later to the translations of many classical works. So we can see that this is very demanding idea of philosophical education, but it is what made like a lot of like great philosophers in the Lvov-Warsaw School. Okay, so this is like very brief introduction to what to those main ideas of Twardowski's program. So Roman Ingarden, who was Twardowski's student for a brief period of time, he was quite a little bit dissatisfied about how Twardowski organized his program. For example, younger students couldn't participate in more advanced classes, and Ingarden wasn't happy about that. But he also wanted to study mathematics, and he, in his memoirs, he says that in Lvov it was not possible to have a good teacher in mathematics, so he wanted to go abroad. And Twardowski advised him several places, and Ingarden chose Göttingen. And in Göttingen he met Husserl. And Ingarden was fascinated by Husserl, and he wrote that that he was thrilled when he learned that one can still ask philosophical questions about the essence, because in his mind it was not possible to do in Lvov. So he decided to work on his doctoral dissertation with Husserl, and he graduated in Freiburg. And then he came back to Poland, and he really wanted to come to Lvov and to work in Lvov. And we know from correspondence with Twardowski, Ingarden's correspondence with Twardowski, like the whole story about that. And the atmosphere of Göttingen and Husserl's teaching style greatly influenced Ingarden. And I think that this influence is discernible in some of his criticism of Twardowski's philosophical problem. So he has two targets of the criticism: the postulate of clarity of speech and the minimalistic approach to philosophical investigations. And I argue that he holds this implicit view that adherence to those postulates led the Lvov-Warsaw School to ignore phenomenology. So about the criticism of the postulate of clarity of speech, Ingarden says that Twardowski adheres to some sort of absoluteness of clarity, and for Ingarden, clarity is relative because philosophical work may be obscure for a reader who is a novice, who lacks specific skills, who is accustomed to certain philosophical language, or an adherent to some other philosophical school. And actually Twardowski responded to this criticism and agrees with Ingarden's arguments, and even says that if one can conclude from his paper that clarity is absolute, it is possible that he himself expressed himself obscurely. So we can see that there was the responsiveness from Twardowski's side towards such type of criticism. And the second criticism is much more harsh. Ingarden delivers it in his paper, The Main Currents of Polish Philosophy. Well, it is not translated into English, it was written in German. And he holds, on the one hand, he holds Twardowski in high esteem, and he appreciates his role in creating philosophical education in Poland, but he's not happy with the direction taken by Twardowski's students. And he argues that this recommendation to work on narrow, precisely defined issues, and to avoid the issues which are hard to embrace, like this is what Ingarden's thought, at least. And it led students to avoid difficult philosophical problems. And for example, Ingarden argues that Twardowski's students started to avoid any theories and concepts that were not clear enough, and started to exclude problems that seemed unsolvable. And Twardowski postulates resulted in rejecting metaphysics, brushing traditional theoretical and cognitive issues aside, and narrowing down philosophical inquiry down to detailed descriptive psychological, logical, and formal ontological questions. So then he goes even further because he argues that Twardowski's program failed because Twardowski did not create a community of researchers who understand each other. And this is a quite harsh judgment, let's say, but we know, and it is hard to agree with that. But Ingarden thought that Twardowski was unable to lead a community of researchers who could embrace vast connections of problems and conduct systematic work on those problems. And the fault lies in Twardowski's methodological rules, because if one only works on isolated problems, one loses sight of any connections between them. So we can, I think this is very harsh, and to anyone who is familiar with the achievements of the school, this criticism seems inaccurate, but there is some justifications to that, in the sense that Ingarden had an image of this ideal philosophical school, and it is based on his experience in Göttingen, and I will not go into details because I took already too much time, but it is in his memoirs from Göttingen, Wspomnienia z Göttingi, and Recollections of Husserl's. He describes very in detail what was Husserl's approach, and generally Husserl's approach was to teach students phenomenology and to work with him on phenomenology. So in this sense, he created such a community who worked on interconnected problems, etc. But it was never Twardowski's goal to do something like that. So I think in this sense, the criticism misses the point. And last, Ingarden also holds this implicit view that this program and this approach to philosophical problems caused students, Twardowski students, to reject phenomenology. And we can find also this in his private writings, because he also always not always, but often complains that when he came back to Poland, he was ignored by philosophers from the Lvov-Warsaw School, and that Husserl's philosophy was conceived as misleading, obscure chatter by philosophers from Warsaw. And he did a lot to disseminate phenomenology in Poland. He wanted to popularize it, and he actually, in spite of this criticism of the Lvov-Warsaw School, he actually cooperated with them in many ways. And he also became a teacher of the youngest generation of Twardowski's students. So last part. So I try to show in the paper that against Ingarden's view, the members of the Lvov-Warsaw School did not ignore phenomenology, and I provide several examples of how they engaged with phenomenology. So there are two fields of that research. So first, they provided various comments on phenomenology and papers devoted to phenomenology, where they try to assess phenomenology as a philosophy. For example, this was done by Władysław Tatarkiewicz in his paper from 1913, which is very early on. And the reception of phenomenology was earlier in the Lvov-Warsaw School than in other analytic centers. So we can go, I don't want to go through all the details, because the paper will be published, so there's no, I think, need for that. But we can find, like in Władysław Tatarkiewicz, in Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz, in Tadeusz Czyżowski, various remarks about phenomenology, and actually remarks about the similarities between phenomenology and the Lvov-Warsaw School, especially in terms of the method of distinction, which was practiced by phenomenologists, and the method of analysis of concept, which was practiced by the Lvov-Warsaw School. And this is then very important, I think, remark that they saw these similarities between those methods, especially in the context of discussion that analytic philosophy applies different methods than continental philosophy. And we also have people like Leopold Blaustein, who actually was very interested in Husserl. He wrote his dissertation, doctoral dissertation on Husserl, and criticized phenomenology from many points of view. And he is also sometimes, but by some scholars, considered as a phenomenologist, but his phenomenology is very specific, so I don't want to go into that. And we have a lot of people who, and this is which interests me the most actually, who wrote, like, who were interested in Husserl's ideas and concepts, but not in phenomenology as such. So they applied analyzed, modified Husserl's concepts, but they didn't apply or criticize or use in any way a phenomenological method. And this is the case, for example, with Husserl's idea of anti-psychologism, which influenced Jan Łukasiewicz, with a concept of semantic category introduced by Husserl, which was later developed by Stanisław Leśniewski and Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz. Husserl's theory of signs, expressions, and meaning was discussed and developed in various directions by Ajdukiewicz, Maria Ossowska, Stanisław Ossowski, and Janina Kotarbińska. His theory of wholes and parts was developed by Eugenia Blaustein, and of course his theory of acts, contents, and objects were a very interests a lot of people from the Lvov-Warsaw School, like Bronisław Bandrowski, Leopold Blaustein, Walter Auerbach, and Tadeusz Witwicki. And what is also of importance here, that several of Twardowski's students went to Göttingen and attended Husserl's seminars, like Leopold Blaustein, for example, who did that. And so this is also, and Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz also went to Göttingen and went into contact with Husserl and Reinach and other phenomenologists. So there are a lot of connections here, which are of big importance, I think, when we think about those relationships between phenomenology and analytic philosophy. And this led some people, some scholars like Jan Woleński and Witold Płotka to even talk about the Lvov Circle of phenomenologists, which was like the youngest generation of Twardowski's students. However, this is still something that has to be investigated, and I do it in my dissertation, not in the paper. I just wanted to highlight this this view that we can talk about some sort of phenomenology within the Lvov-Warsaw School, but it was very specific. So to conclude, I only wanted, like in the paper, I provided the overview of the issues surrounding this relationship between the Lvov-Warsaw School, Ingarden, and phenomenology. And I think that Twardowski's preference for philosophical minimalism, like Ingarden is right that he considers this preference toward philosophical minimalism and clarity an important factor in reception of phenomenology, but it was not negative in the sense in which Ingarden saw it as an ignorance of phenomenology. They simply, Twardowski students were simply interested in those detailed, these detailed, narrower issues, which they took from Husserl and developed later. So not in phenomenological method as such. And they criticized it from this point of, criticized the phenomenological method from the point of view of clarity, for example, or other like values which were important for the Lvov-Warsaw School. We can also see that the starting point for many of them was Brentanian descriptive psychology when they developed this sort of specific phenomenology. So there are many issues here which are to be investigated, and I didn't want to talk so long about that. The one thing which I think is also important, and this is the last point, and this I think relates to what Professor Brożek said before me, that they actually, when the people who were mostly interested in phenomenology and Husserl did not generally apply logic in their analysis of phenomenology or these ideas like Leopold Blaustein or Walter Auerbach or Tadeusz Witwicki. They mainly worked in descriptive psychology. So they had more of this descriptive approach and not a formal approach. So I think this is also an important point here. So thank you very much, and sorry for talking too long this time.
Thank you very much, Aleksandra. I don't know if you agree that for some reasons disagreements which we see now from the perspective of 100 years, yeah, sometimes we find silly, or we cannot understand why they could not just talk with each other. They hated each other because of some not important matters, like the terminological distinctions which were differently put in these both schools. Or I don't know, I don't see so much problem in stating that the phenomenologists search for these essences, and analytic philosophers for the definitions, and they do the same. You know, what's the problem? And they see so many problems in that. I think that sometimes from the time perspective of some time, we don't find it so, you know, deep, these differences, as they found it. And and so sometimes these conflicts just are felt something strange. But on the other hand, as we see it, for instance, medieval philosophers had disputes about the concepts of Trinity or something, which we also find something strange now. So perhaps it depends on the epoch. Okay, so are there any questions to the paper of Aleksandra? Any questions, comments? Yes, Ewelina, please.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you, Aleksandra, for your introduction. And I'm sorry we didn't present what you expected. I think that unfortunately my paper is very long already, and there is enough publications about this topic, so we skipped that one. But I wanted to ask you, because this was one of my also questions since I started this research. Maybe you know, what is the attitude towards propedeutic on the high school or gymnasium level in the case of Ingarden or the phenomenology movement? Because I haven't run into anything. I don't know if I didn't search the right way. They didn't, for sure, he didn't participate in this discussion that took place in the philosophical journals. So I wonder if they had any attitude, if you know anything was published about that, because that would be interesting to see if only the Lvov-Warsaw School members were interested in high school level philosophy or not.
Well, I think I can say a little bit maybe about Ingarden's attitudes maybe towards it, because he was a high school teacher for many years, and it was to his regret, because he wanted to, he thought that when he will come back to Poland, and I think he held himself in a high esteem, and he wanted to obtain the chair of philosophy. And I describe, like in the paper, I write about these tensions on this level, that he thought that Twardowski sabotaged his appointment to the chair, and there was a whole story about that. So and he generally in his like diaries and private writings, we can learn that he hated teaching at school. And I don't know actually any of Ingarden's paper on philosophical educations in terms of like high school education. I think this was not of interest for like outside the scope of his interest. And in phenomenology, well, I don't know like what all of Husserl's students were interested in, but I'm not. Well, I try to think about, probably if you Google phenomenology of education, you can find something like contemporary, because there is a phenomenology about everything right now. But regarding this period of Göttingen Circle and Freiburg, I don't think that they were so interested in this, in the topic of on teaching philosophy, like or in philosophy of teaching philosophy, let's say. because back then, of course, they could maybe someone studied the essence, like try to analyze like the essence, like this idea of teaching, and you can probably apply phenomenological method to do this, to look for the essence of teaching, or something like that, or philosophical teaching. But I don't know actually where if they did that, but if I encounter something, I will share with you. But in terms of Ingarden, I only know that he despised being a teacher in high school. He didn't want to do that. He only did that because he had to earn money. So I don't think he was interested in philosophical propedeutic.
Yes, so if I may refer to that, so unfortunately, you just kind of confirm my expectations, and it unfortunately also you only make a stronger claim about the unusuality of engagement of Lvov-Warsaw School members into this topic, because really these top members of the school engaged, published something into the discussion, published textbook for propedeutic, and I think most of them had experience at school. Professor Brożek will be more precise because I didn't go farther than Twardowski yet, but I also know that Twardowski recommended teaching at school, and he considered teaching at school kind of important for the workshop, for the preparation for university teaching.
Because Twardowski, well, he himself was a teacher in high school, but he was an exception in his own school.
Yeah.
But he was a private teacher, and he had a very difficult student. It was in the Count Dzieduszycki's house, and the son of Count Dzieduszycki was, well, not so untalented, but he was not subordinated student, and very, very difficult, to teach. And that's why Twardowski had to, adjust to what he had, and it was really, really difficult experience for him. There were some conflicts between Twardowski and the parents of this child, and so on and so on. And he recommended to his students to have this experience at high schools, and the majority of Twardowski students for some time, for a few years or more, were teachers of philosophy propedeutics, but also of other subjects, like Izydora Tomska taught the Polish literature and language. Some of them taught physics. Tarski taught mathematics in high school. He also hated it because Tarski used to say that, what stupid people, they don't understand anything like that, but it was, and also Ajdukiewicz was a high school teacher, because Twardowski used to say that the philosophical ideas had to be expressed in such a way that an intelligent person from high school should understand it, So if we can explain something to people which are on this middle, level of education, that means that we can explain it really clearly, and that's what we aim for. And this school of explaining something to people who are not, finished scholars, they're at some level of their development, was an important skill. Also, because for Twardowski, the plan was to go with philosophy to the whole society, whole educated society. So also people who don't study philosophy, who don't attend philosophy courses, should have access to some philosophical ideas. Twardowski did it through philosophical journals, philosophical society, lectures for a larger audience, and it was also very important for him that his students also are able to do that, to popularize philosophy, to write about philosophy, to speak about philosophy to people who are not specialists. So that was his idea.
And if I can still add that this is also inspiring to see that they, because of their practice, they were I would say, professional contributors to the discussion, because what I discovered on this meetings of philosophers is that there are some professors talking about what should be in high school, but they never taught in high school. So their recommendations, and they didn't, that's what you also said, they didn't agree with Twardowski. They criticized the program that was present, that was Twardowski. And even Edukovic very strongly expressed that he is satisfied with the program. And most of them wanted changes, but all of them had ideas, and very precise ideas, very practical ideas. So you can see that they really engaged into this problem, and they had some point in that, and they could justify why this is better or worse for some reason. And the scale of this whole discussion and this work, I think, is very unusual, and for philosophy in general. And when I talk about this abroad, people are surprised how big contribution the school provided. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think we are about to end our meeting. I think it was really fruitful. I am very happy that we had today 2 papers presented written by young scholars who contributed to the journal, our journal Edukacja Filozoficzna, the International Journal for Philosophical Education. Please believe me that also other papers which will be included in this volume are equally valuable. So let's wait for the whole volume, in fact 2 volumes, which will be published really very soon. Thank you very much for this meeting. It was great for me to be with you today.
Thank you so much. And I also want to add one last announcement. This will not be the last seminar, but rather the first one. So we will be organizing more webinars. Probably the next one will take place at the turn of January and February, maybe in the beginning of February, with another submissions, maybe for this issue or for some other issue. So I just recommend you to stay in touch, to observe our social media and emails from Edukacja Filozoficzna email, so that you may participate if you want. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I also recommend you to visit the fan page of the Lvov-Warsaw School Research Center, namely the film I'm the head of. Tomorrow, for instance, we have an interesting meeting with Magdalena Matusiak-Rojek about female members of the Lvov-Warsaw School. We have this cycle of meetings about female representatives of the Lvov-Warsaw School. Also in January there are a lot of events. So let's follow Edukacja Filozoficzna, let's follow the Lvov-Warsaw School Research Center, and it was lovely to meet you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.